Hey everyone, welcome to Daily Revelations. This is a very short and brief Bible study that we go through a chapter of the Bible a week using precept methods. And so I welcome you to join in this study with me as we're going through Daniel and just starting out that study. So today is our second day in Daniel 1, and every day through the week, Monday through that following Sunday, we read through the same chapter, but dig out things that God reveals to us, our daily revelations. So today, being day 2, what I ask you to do, and if you download the planner, that you'll find the link in the video here, or if you're listening on the podcast, you'll find that there. Day 2 is about comparison contrast, or looking at different ways that the author is using different ways of writing. And comparison contrast is a big one for this chapter. And I'm going to point out some of them, but I want you to go through, and maybe what I dug out of it isn't what God is wanting to talk to you about. So make sure you do this yourself. Don't just listen to me and say, oh, that was a really nice devotional. No, this is about getting in, digging deep for yourself. So when I went through this, I took a different color marker, and happened to be pink. And if you're watching the video, I'm going to show you what my Bible looks like. I write a lot in it, and I found basically 5 major comparison contrasts. And I thought usually sometimes when I do that, one will pop out to me, and that will just the Holy Spirit will just speak to my heart about that comparison contrast. What he did instead today was the sum total of all the comparison contrasts that I saw within this chapter. So completely different take, but it still had a message, and that is what we're looking for. That's what we're digging for. That's what we're asking God to speak to us in. So keep digging, because he's got a revelation for you. That's my encouragement. So the first one was in verse 2, and it talks about how the vessels of God were taken from the temple in Jerusalem and put into a storehouse for this foreign god. And yuck, that was a loss for Israel. Here, their temple was desecrated. The articles gone. They were no longer in Jerusalem. Then we look at the second comparison contrast in verses 3 through 5. Here's these young royals, these gentlemen, these men that were being trained to lead this country that now is desolate, gone. But yet they're scooped up and put in training to lead in Babylon. That is definitely a change of events, isn't it? It's a loss of the future of Israel. And then we go on to verse 7. And in verse 7, they even get their names changed. They don't even get to keep their own names and be called by their own names. And that is a loss of really their identity. Their names, as in when people name their children, it has a meaning to go with it. And here this meaning was wiped out as well. And the next comparison contrast was something that Daniel and his friends chose to do, and that was their diet change. And it was an act of them to let go of their worldly passions and what would direct them. The loss of allowing life to just go the way it feels good, and instead being very purposeful in that. So here's all these losses happening. They have a loss of their traditions, and they have a loss of their future. They have a loss of their identity, and a loss of living content and in the world. But what did they gain? Here's the last comparison contrast I want to point out to you, and this is so cool. In verses 17 and 19, we see that God gave these 4 men knowledge and intelligence and wisdom beyond what they probably would have ever achieved had they stayed in Israel. And on top of that, they were put in the king's personal service. And this king, the king of Babylon, was the king basically at that time of the world. And instead of this nation that God was pretty fed up with, Here they were promoted to having influence at a worldwide level. Yes, they had a lot of losses. And sometimes we look at our lives and we say, what are the losses that I have? And we focus on them so much, we get caught up in them, that we forget that when God asks us to make some sacrifices and let go of things, that there is a greater gain. And sometimes it doesn't come right away. These men waited 3 years to see this happen. And 3 years, in the context of God, is pretty short. So we can be losing a lot of things. In this quarantine, we probably have lost a lot. And there's so many unknowns. But I promise you, if you follow God in and through anything, He always has a greater gain. So that's what I want you to stick with. So this is your daily revelation for today. Thank you for joining me on this video or this podcast. And I will see you again tomorrow as we continue to dig through Daniel 1 in Daily Revelations. Bye, everybody.